Welcome everybody, and welcome to the Creator DAO's AMA with Vader Protocol. I'd like to introduce Mervin, the lead of Vader Protocol. Mervin, would you like to please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and how you came up with the idea of Vader Protocol?
Yeah, I'm Mervin. I'm actually not part of the core Vader Protocol team, but I'm the community lead for the Vader Protocol team. As you know, the Vader Protocol team is largely anonymous. They are focusing on just developing the program and the whole protocol, and I'm focused on really growing the community. So I'm Mervin. I actually started in the cryptocurrency space in 2017. Over the past few years, I've actually built a staking service provider called Stake with Us. We are a local Singapore government-backed staking service provider, and we've also launched a yield aggregation platform called Unagi that offers yields to not only proof of stake assets, but also stablecoin, ETH, BTC kind of yields. So I've actually been involved with the Vader Protocol community for the past 18 months now. The actual protocol was basically a Discord group of community members that actually wanted a way of fairly distributing tokens, right? So we came up with the idea called vETH, which was the whole origin of how Vader Protocol came about. vETH basically is a grassroots fair launch protocol where users compete in daily auctions to distribute a token called vETH by burning Ethereum daily. So this was a really fair distribution that modeled the way Bitcoin and Ethereum was distributed. And as we moved along through the many months within the vETH protocol community, we noticed that there were a lot of up and coming DeFi protocols that brought a lot of innovation, but didn't exist on EVM or Ethereum. So if you take a look at what we're actually combining, right, it's protocols like Luna stablecoin, which isn't accessible on EVM, and also the Torchain CLP, which hasn't really actually been built on the Ethereum virtual machine. So the team basically came in and then started work and research around combining all the best elements of DeFi into one single DeFi application, just as DeFi 2.0 and the whole protocol own liquidity narrative came along. So right now I'm working very closely with the core dev team. The core dev team consists of 4 experienced Solidity developers, 3 full stack devs, and 3 operational team members. So in total, there's 10 members working with the Vader Protocol community. I'm not the only one leading efforts in the community. There's a lot of other community members. If you join our Discord and Telegram group, you can see them helping out a lot with marketing, operational stuff. So the whole idea came about really as a grassroots, like a fair launch kind of protocol. Yeah, that's how actually Vader Protocol came about. And yeah, really excited to be here.
Thanks so much for that, Mervin. It sounds like you guys have been around for quite a while, and it's really good to see. And the team being 10 people, 10 core people, as you said, but also a larger community, that's always a good sign. So why Vader? Why the name Vader? What is Vader Protocol in a nutshell?
Well, the name Vader was a very interesting name that actually came from the writer of the white paper when the whole idea came about. So vETH sounded very similar to Vader, and there was a lot of like meme potential around the name Vader. Vader actually means father in Dutch, right? So we wanted a protocol that actually could combine all the different DeFi elements into one single unified application. And Vader Protocol, basically, when I try to introduce Vader to everyone, I would always just summarize it as a combination of Terra's stablecoin, Torchain's AMM, and the bond sale mechanisms of Olympus Pro. So it's really complex, so that's why we choose to simplify it in these 3 different protocols. Basically, there is this asset called Vader, it's very similar to Luna, where it's basically the collateral for minting stablecoins, right? So as we all know, Luna has proven to be the fastest growing stablecoin mechanism. Just like Luna, Vader is the variable counterpart to the stable asset USDV. By modulating supply, Vader's price increases as the demand for stablecoin increases. So we're bringing this to the EVM through Vader, and we're also bringing in continuous liquidity pools that have been pioneered by Torchain. I believe it's one of the most important features of Torchain as traders compete for trade opportunities and pay maximally to liquidity providers. So the slip-based fees and the IL protection offered by the Vader Protocol actually make it the best AMM for LPs. So because all the pairs within the AMM are anchored against USDV, meaning that the pairs are BTC against USDV, Ethereum against USDV, Vader against USDV. So by having an AMM from day one, you can see that that will actually help to bootstrap demand for algorithmic stablecoin like USDV. We've seen a lot of other stablecoin launched and failed over the years because there's actually not much utility from for the stablecoin from day one. So we've took this actually a lot from the lessons we've learned observing Luna and how they actually drive utility to stablecoin, and we chose the path of actually driving the deepest liquidity pools that actually help provide the most value to liquidity providers. This is basically the core tenet of what we're building. And also one of the last protocols that I talked about was Olympus Pro. I believe it's one of the greatest innovations to emerge in DeFi ever since Uniswap V2 and the AMM came about, which is the idea of bond sales, right? So we've seen that there's a lot of liquidity mining schemes since DeFi summer, and over the past year, you've seen a lot of farms come, and then there's a lot of like price pumps and dumps because liquidity providers are proven to be very fickle and mercenary in their capital, right? So we realized that by using the bond sale mechanism, we are able to actually build an AMM that actually owns its liquidity. I don't think there's any other AMM on Ethereum that's attempting to do this, but I believe it actually gives us the longest lasting potential for any AMM, because incentive tokens that are given out are actually in exchange for liquidity pairs, which ensures that this protocol owned liquidity is it's less transient and more perpetual in nature.
Yeah, I think you're right. Olympus DAO's bond sales, where the protocol owned liquidity is such a huge innovation. I mean, sticky liquidity, sticky TVL is something that plagues most DeFi protocols, especially stablecoin, liquidity pools. So if finding a way to get around that issue is super important. So apart from maybe the stickiness of liquidity, what other problems is Vader trying to solve?
So I think the key problem that we're solving is really trying to build a truly decentralized stablecoin that is censorship resistant. Like I've mentioned earlier, we've seen a lot of algo stablecoins launched that come and gone. Like you've seen some still going at it. Like if you see Frax, Fei, a lot of the stablecoins that are still in the market, still trying to get utility and get more adoption within the entire ecosystem. But I don't think any of them have actually gone out of the way to try to build their own AMM like what we've done. So also from our past experience, even looking at some of the other failed attempts of algo stablecoins like the empty-set dollar ecosystem and all that, is that we've seen that most algo stablecoins eventually fail. I think the only algo stablecoin that has really worked is the Luna UST algo stablecoin. And the thing is that I've not seen anyone try to build the Luna UST stablecoin within Ethereum itself. So we're actually bringing this to the EVM while actually building real utility for the stablecoin right from the get-go. So I guess what we're really trying to build is a truly decentralized stablecoin on Ethereum. While UST exists on Terra, I believe that it's not actually as censorship resistant, because if you look at the validators securing the network, there's actually just 100 validators. The bridge that is bridging UST over to Ethereum is also run mainly by the company behind Terra, which is TFL, right? So there's not actually one that's built on Ethereum and the EVM, which is secured by proof of work, which we know Ethereum basically gives the most decentralization and the best security elements through proof of work, right? So we're trying to build a truly uncensorable stablecoin on Ethereum, and we not only that, we want to actually be able to power a lot of all the different kind of applications within the EVM ecosystem. So UST we've seen them try to build out a lot of applications on their own Terra blockchain, but I think it's going to be a lot faster for us because of the fact that there's so much composability within Ethereum. We are able to bridge the USDV over to a lot of different partners, and we're actually in discussions with a lot of potential partners to integrate the USDV once it launches.
Yeah, I mean, the use cases available on the Ethereum blockchain as opposed to the Luna and Terra, which is fantastic, but yeah, it's absolutely the place to be on Ethereum for the foreseeable, we think. So yeah, I mean, if that's how it plays out, if you can get a lot of adoption, then absolutely, I'm very excited to see how that happens. So could you by any chance sort of give us a bit of a quick dive into how the Vader protocol actually works? In particular, maybe the AMM liquidity pools that you were talking about bootstrapping with your own protocol own liquidity.
Oh, yeah, so Vader protocol basically anchors its AMM liquidity pools with its native stablecoin USDV. So like I mentioned, every single pair within the AMM is anchored against USDV. So as liquidity enters into the protocol, you will see demand for USDV being bootstrapped. So how is USDV actually minted, right? So there is a TWAP function that allows accurate pricing of Vader against the US dollar. And we have this burn to mint mechanism similar to how Luna and UST works. Basically, the whole algorithmic stabilizing mechanism basically means that when USDV trades above $1, users are incentivized to burn Vader into USDV, sell it down, and capture that premium, right? So when USDV trades under $1, users, basically arbors and traders, are incentivized to buy up USDV, let's say at 95 cents, burn it into Vader because they get $1 worth of Vader, and eventually convert that back into the Vader token. So basically, this is a proven mechanism that has worked for Luna on its own blockchain. And we're copying the exact same model, but with a TWAP function that actually synergizes with how the AMM works. So the AMM itself basically is an AMM that is slightly different from the Uniswap V2 or the Balancer Bancor kind of model, where the liquidity pools, right, have a slip-based fee, meaning that the fee here is dependent on the depth of the pools. Meaning that the deeper liquidity pools have a smaller fee, and the thinner pools charge a larger fee. And all these fees go to liquidity. The other thing that the liquidity pools have is impermanent loss protection and also SINs. So these three different elements are basically from Torchain. Torchain has proven and deployed them across many different asset pairs. The idea behind Torchain is the continuous liquidity pools basically is the best possible AMM for liquidity providers, meaning that we are prioritizing liquidity providers as the first-class citizens here, where fees are maximally paid out to LPs. And with the impermanent loss protection, liquidity providers are ensured, right, that not only do they earn the maximum fees, they are also covered against impermanent losses. The reserve basically pays out the impermanent loss protection over 100 days just to ensure that any LPs within the pools do not have to deal with impermanent losses. So the last element is the bond sale mechanism to ensure permanent liquidity for its AMM. So I think a lot of people misunderstand Vader Protocol and OM, right? We are not actually a OM fork. What we're actually doing is just taking the bond sale mechanism, meaning that the distribution of the liquidity incentive tokens, what we intend to do is to take those tokens and distribute them by purchasing LP positions, not only on our Uniswap pair, but also on our native AMM. So that's the whole idea behind moving away from the farm and dump kind of liquidity mining by conducting regular bond sales to purchase liquidity positions from the market in return for a discounted rate. So the users get a discounted rate over a vesting period. So I think the OM model is actually here to stay for a very long time. But what people fail to realize is that the OM model actually is basically just an IDO, right? It's a long distribution mechanism. You still need a product behind it. OM's product like now is the community and the culture behind it, and also the Olympus Pro product, which is basically their product is distributing tokens. Helping other protocols own their liquidity through Olympus Pro. So I guess if Creator DAO is planning to launch their own kind of token, your product is the creators behind it, right? So we've seen a lot of own forks come and go like over the past few months, but I think that the distribution mechanism is here to stay because this is really truly innovative, but there must be a product behind it. That product for us is the AMM and the stablecoin.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how you're going to do all of it together in a single ecosystem. You're taking parts from popular successful projects such as Bancor, Uniswap, Terra with the stable coins, Frax with their burning mechanisms, and putting it all together into one ecosystem. It's really, really interesting. Could you please explain a little bit maybe about the slip-based fee AMM? What sort of advantage does this type of AMM have over others, such as the Uniswap style standard AMM?
So the liquidity dependent slip-based fee here means that the traders pay liquidity providers fees based on the amount of liquidity in the pool. So this trade is inherited from Chain's CLP, where basically more fees are paid when the pools are thinner and less fees are paid when the pools have more depth, right? So this ensure liquidity providers earn maximum fees based on market demand for liquidity. So as opposed to if you look at Uniswap, which V2, which actually started at 0.3%, and Uniswap V3, which has adjusted it from 0.3% to 0.05%, you will realize that most liquidity providers on Uniswap aren't actually earning a lot of fees, and they still have to deal with the impermanent losses. I think that Bancor recently released an article with regards to Uni V3, and even though they have concentrated liquidity, a lot of the LPs are actually losing out once you factor in impermanent losses. So what we're actually intending to do with the AMM here is to basically prioritize and make the liquidity providers first-class citizens. So the whole premise of why this AMM with dynamic fees and impermanence protection work is that if we treat LPs as our priority, we are able to create a liquidity black hole that basically sucks in all the liquidities and allows LPs to earn maximally with insurance against IL, and thereby growing to the largest liquidity pool, creating a huge sink for USDV, but also because of the pools becoming so deep, users now have the best trading experience within the AMM. So this is the whole idea of why we think that the AMM space can be innovated with slip-based fees, and at the same time, integrating that together with our stablecoin.
Really, really fantastic idea. I mean, many things, the 100-day lockup on the impermanent loss protection, that's 100 days of, almost locked up liquidity for new projects. New projects always struggle with liquidity incentivization. So the smaller the pool, the more money you get when you're in there, the more fees you produce when you're in there. So it's an incentive. And you can imagine if you, stack that on DeFi Legos in a yield farming protocol or something, additional rewards, or it's really, 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 really awesome. What a fantastic idea. So that's the AMM. The AMM itself is really innovative, lots of new things combining with old things. But what are the advantages of USDV over other algorithmic stablecoins such as UST or Frax?
Yeah, so I think UST, like I mentioned earlier, it's because it's on the DPoS model of the Cosmos SDK, which we're really familiar with. The whole idea of the DPoS model, I feel it's not as uncensorable as the Ethereum blockchain is right now with proof of work. So a lot of the UST and the apps that you see there, I think right now there is no proven kind of algo stable that is accessible trustlessly on the EVM. So even with UST, you actually have to put it through a bridge, which is a REC bridge run by a centralized entity. So with USDV, you actually have that uncensorable kind of stablecoin that gives you a lot of freedom over fiat-backed stablecoins like USDC and USDT. And at the same time, I think you actually open up the whole idea of an algo stablecoin to the EVM chains. Frax, compared to Frax, I would say that Frax is slowly decentralizing from a majority USDC-backed kind of model into more a reserve-backed model with other kind of stablecoins. But to have something that's really algorithmically stabilized on the EVM, I don't think that's something we've seen yet.
Yes, it's true. It's sort of partially collateralized, partially algorithmically stabilized. So you mentioned before that the AMM is going to become a sink for USDV. This is a really good use case. So, one of the key successes to an algorithmic stablecoin is the utility of the ecosystem, driving demand for its usage. So, what else do you plan to do to develop the ecosystem around your stablecoin USDV?
Yeah, so I think we've identified that the core, one of the core criteria of launching a stablecoin is to first generate liquidity, right? So the AMM and the Curve3 pool that we plan to launch will likely be the core sources of liquidity for USDV. Once we've actually established deep liquidity pools on top of those bond sales to ensure permanent liquidity, what we actually plan to do is actually further drive utility and more sinks for USDV. So we're actually in touch with a few different partners already that are planning to use USDV, not only with their own kind of distribution model where they intend to take in USDV-based bonds, USDV-paired bonds, but also further utility within the DeFi and GameFi space. So there's another protocol that we're discussing, possibly building a bonding curve on an insurance protocol that takes in USDV to allow users to actually hedge against any kind of loss through purchase of cover through USDV. There's also a few other own kind of distribution token models that intend to build out GameFi kind of products on top of USDV. This means that you actually can purchase NFT assets with USDV, then build out the whole metaverse kind of ecosystem with the USDV as the underlying settlement token, right, with stablecoin. So there's also quite a few others that we're in really early discussions with, a few other AMMs and even some L2 driven AMMs that we intend to work with. I guess more information can be released once we actually have an official announcement from those partners.
Sure. We can't give away too much alpha because it's still early stages.
Yeah.
So what is, understanding your token distribution for the Vader token, what was the rationale for issuing Vader to the vETH assets, the vETH holders? Is there a partnership between your two projects?
So vETH actually started as a fair launch distribution mechanism. So when vETH actually first launched, Vader actually hasn't been conceived, right? We just wanted the way, a fair way to distribute tokens, and we thought that the proof of work mining model of Bitcoin and Ethereum was basically the fairest distribution mechanism. And if you've seen, that's also because people value that decentralization. People tend to choose Bitcoin and Ethereum as the top two crypto assets in anyone's portfolio. Right? That's why they're the top two assets in the cryptocurrency space. So we really valued that kind of proof of work, kind of fair distribution where anyone is able to access it, but it was slightly different in that users don't need hardware. They don't need to buy mining rigs to be able to purchase or to mine or acquire their Bitcoin or Ethereum, where users basically took Ethereum, which is accessible to anyone with a MetaMask or Web3 wallet, right? And took that and burned the Ethereum in return for a distribution of vETH, which is vETH, right? So there's also a halving schedule with vETH that mimics the whole Bitcoin kind of distribution model. So the idea here is that there's a value transfer from burning Ethereum. So if you really look at the history of vETH, there's around $35 million worth of Ether that has been burned to acquire this asset called vETH. And none of these tokens have been like distributed for free, right? Every user has paid a price and transferred the value that they burned from Ethereum into vETH. And from vETH, they are required to burn it into vETH in order to transfer the value over to vETH. So the whole reason for this was to be able to not only have a fair distribution, but to ascribe a sort of value to the initial distribution of tokens. And that's why you can see a huge community, really grassroots community, like rallying around this, because none of this was given out to VCs or to any kind of partner. All of this was just fairly distributed. And I think it was worth it, because when we launched, we hit 2,000. Right now we have 2,200 holders, just even though we launched for around 3 to 4 weeks. So that was the whole idea behind it. And now that the snapshot is over, we've moved away from vETH over to the Vader Protocol, and we're going to focus on distributing tokens fairly to liquidity providers through the bond sales.
It's one of my favorite parts about DeFi, that we can see a project doing something, in a way that we appreciate, like a fair launch with no VC, with no VC sort of preceding. And then we can reward that project or the project holders, and you get to choose your audience. And you can also, by using an airdrop, have a pre-created community, and it's a really awesome thing. And it's nice that it's called vETH. So the Vader protocol is working with lots of other ideas and DeFi protocols, the DeFi Legos, the stacking on top of each other. One issue that this does present, though, is that the risk from the smart contract risk or other risks compounds each time you add a new layer. So what active steps is Vader protocol taking to deal with these risks in terms of your own smart contract security risks, but also to mitigate the exponential risk fashion potential when you stack DeFi Legos?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest possible risk to us and failure as a protocol is like the smart contract risk. And we've actually identified this as possibly the highest risk factor among all different kind of risks that faces the protocol, right? So smart contract risk, we decided to take a very phased approach to launching. So as you can see right now, we just launched the Vader token, the XVader kind of staking token to reward long-term holders. But by launching the Vader token first, we want to ensure the proper price discovery, build price stability, and build a community around the token before deploying the other kind of features that are the TWAP function to basically price the Vader in USD terms before turning on the switch to allow users to burn Vader to USDV, right? So once Vader to USDV burns up, initialized, we would launch a tree pool to allow for sufficient liquidity to build up in the tree pool, so that it's an easy way to access the USDV token. That there won't be apes like trying to rush to burn Vader to USDV and destabilize the peg, right? So we want to use the tree pool to be able to provide sufficient liquidity before the AMM launches. So as you can see, we're taking a very phased slow kind of approach to deploying the entire protocol as opposed to releasing it all at once out to the edge, right? So at the AMM launch, we are also going to be very selective with our assets because there's internal loss protection. We don't want to risk users having to just add in any asset and try to exploit the internal loss payouts from the reserve. So we're likely going to go with Vader, BTC, and ETH just for launch against USDV before we actually transition to a DAO and allow more users to actually propose and add more assets into the AMM. So that is, I think, the best way to deal with possible smart contract risk. And of course, we've also done our necessary audits, right? So far, we've actually gone through multiple design iterations. We have already performed 2 audits with Code Arena. We are likely to go with another third one once we have remediated all the fixes that have been identified over the past month. And once that is done, I think we can go ahead with a very phased approach to launching. Obviously, we're also going to work with other partners like Immunify to have bounties up, have more audits whenever we want to implement any kind of code changes. And to us, I think the best approach is really guarded launches, right? So when we want to deploy the contracts to allow users to burn Vader to USDV, I think it would make sense to have certain kind of caps in terms of, let's say, 24-hour caps. The total protocol can only mint, let's say, 10 million USDV and keep raising those caps as we move along. So the design iterations have always factored in this kind of smart contract risk considerations and to be able to isolate this kind of risk in a very phased approach to launching. So basically, it's just a phased rollout with limits to help reduce this risk.
Yeah, that sounds the most sensible. And you mentioned briefly about, for example, Immunify, an insurance protocol. So that's really great to see that you're sort of thinking about stacking also elsewhere, but in the security way as well, not just in terms of sort of AMM and DeFi money creation, more money preservation too. So what stage is the project development currently in?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we've already deployed the Vader and USD and the X-Vader token. Right now, what we intend to do is actually bolster the liquidity on Uniswap. And that's why we actually plan to roll out the bonds this week. It's likely going to be deployed by tomorrow. So users are able to purchase bonds for Vader ETH pair on Uniswap. That will actually help to increase the liquidity on Uniswap to allow the TWAP to accurately price the USDV, the Vader token in US dollars to enable USDV minting. So once we're done with those audits in probably 1 to 2 weeks, we should be able to deploy USDV and the necessary tree pool. I think probably a couple of weeks after that, we can go ahead with the AMM deployment. So I think most of the protocol, the core functionality of the protocol should be deployed over the next, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks.
That's really interesting. So am I right in saying that the bonds that are on sale right now will offer a discount for the Vader token or otherwise for users that purchase it now?
Yeah, so they're likely to have a discount rate that should give a decent ROI, though we are not going to be launching it like OHM. OHM's model basically has a distribution of tokens over a perpetual bond sale. What we actually came up with is the idea of flash bond sales. So before the USDV token launches, we don't want to have to deal with too much dilution. So we're likely going to control it and just deal with very small releases of the Vader token until the USDV and the AMM goes live. Then we will start to increase that kind of inflation on the Vader token.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the beautiful things about the immutable blockchain is that things can't be changed, but also it sometimes is a hindrance. So it's always good to be more careful and slow and get things right to begin with. So it's great that you're doing that. So you're launching obviously on layer 1 Ethereum. Do you plan to go multi-chain at some point in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen over the past, 6 months that we are in for a multi-chain future, right? So Vader will first be deployed on L1 Ethereum, mainly because there's composability needs. We need the curve tree pool, factory contract, we need the access to capital to actually build protocol on liquidity. I believe Ethereum has the largest access to capital, despite the gas fees. There's a lot of whales there. So once we actually acquire the protocol on liquidity, I think that's where the fun really starts, right? Because I don't think many people realize this, but with protocol on liquidity, you actually can now have cross-chain protocol on liquidity. You are now able to start deploying across like all the EVM compatible chains, whether it's Phantom, Avalanche, Polygon, Binance Smart Chain. From a treasury perspective, it will make the most sense for the protocol on liquidity to start deploying this capital across all these EVM chains based on demand, as opposed to, you've seen a lot of protocols try to go ahead and launch on other EVM chains, and then liquidity starts to splinter across all the different chains, and it makes for a very poor user experience when the traders come in and try to trade on pools that do not have sufficient depth. So I think it would make most sense once we actually acquire enough POL to start maybe with one or two chains. Like possibly I've seen the ones with the most user traction are like the Avalanche or Phantom or Polygon. So that's what we probably intend to do. And also, I think we're not ruling out the possibility of eventually becoming a standalone chain. I think we've seen Compound amass huge TVL, and now they're starting to explore like substrate-based L1 kind of deployments to really go cross-chain. So that's another possibility. But obviously, the core focus right now over the next, I would say, 3 months will be to get as much liquidity in the L1 deployment as possible.
Yeah, it's a constantly changing scene, but the one sort of constant remaining is Ethereum. So it's makes a lot of sense. You guys are doing a lot. It seems, you know, so many different mechanics and such a great idea with a lot of scope. But what challenges have you guys faced in the process, and how do you resolve those challenges as a team?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest challenges and the whole reason why I actually reached out to Creator DAO was that because we are completely fair launched, we don't have like big VC names backing. We don't actually have like big names for users to take notice. It's hard for us to actually get the word out, right? So for us, due to the complexity of the entire protocol, I think education is the core, the thing that we're actually struggling with. We have to spend a lot of time on creating videos and documentation and content to really try to explain to users what all these moving parts are. We have the stablecoin and then the AMM and the bonds. So education, I think it's really the most important thing for us right now, and that's what we really struggle with. So I think what we can do with Creator DAO is actually go hand in hand with this phased rollout. So as we launch bonds, we want to educate users what the beta bonds are. As we launch the stablecoin, we want to explain to them what the stablecoin is, the AMM's core functionality. So I think working with Creator DAO can actually help us to solve a lot of these issues that we're facing. Because the core team is mainly focused on the security, the solidity elements to the protocol, right? So as a community, what we're trying to do is to get creators to really understand what we're really building here before getting the word out.
It's a problem that it seems to be plaguing the whole of DeFi, with the education and the onboarding system. So Creator DAO, we're trying to do, we're trying our best to solve that issue. I'm very much looking forward to trying to educate your users and other users about all the different components that Vader Protocol is doing. So let's move on to maybe the long-term vision for Vader Protocol. Like, what is it that you guys hope the 5-10 year plan looks like?
Yeah, so I think we have a lot of ambitions here, where the core vision here is to really build a truly trustless, a fairly distributed and uncensorable decentralized stablecoin, right? And we want to build a whole ecosystem around this stablecoin USDV. So we really envision a whole ecosystem of USDV-based projects to be built out after we've launched sufficient liquidity with our liquidity pools and bonds. We want to go ahead and get the USDV integrated with as many other different protocols, whether it's lending protocols like Aave, Compound, a lot of the new DeFi 2.0 ones, and also trying to get USDV as the core like decentralized stablecoin within the Ethereum and EVM ecosystem. I think we've seen a lot of like the recent press around stablecoin regulation. I think you're going to see a lot more clampdowns against like centralized stablecoins, KYC, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really truly important to get a truly decentralized and uncensorable stablecoin really propagated within the entire cryptocurrency space.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the stable coin is the thing that will keep the value within crypto, right? Not having to cash out your Bitcoin in order to secure your value is the thing that's going to keep the wheels turning. So it's been a really, really great chat, and thank you so much for coming on. Like, is there anything else any upcoming events or any incentives that you think users should be aware of?
So I think the most up and coming one is the bond sales that we're going to announce shortly, probably within 24 hours. That will actually allow users to purchase Vader at a discount in exchange for the Vader ETH liquidity. So right after that, I think we're going to be working on launching the USDV together with the Curve3 pool. So we're going to have more exposure on that front. Stablecoin holders are able to just join the tree pool even if they just only have USDC or USDT or DAI, and they're able to earn yield in terms of Vader with the USDV Curve3 pool. And once that is up, I think the fun bit will start with the AMM and the bond sales, where we try to bootstrap liquidity and have perpetual bond sales for USDV anchored pairs on the AMM. And once we actually have the goal of achieving sufficient liquidity to provide the best user experience on the Vader AMM, we're going to start with cross-chain deployments. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the most promising ones are probably the Avalanche, Polychain, Phantom kind of protocol. So that's what's up and coming. And once we actually have all this sorted, we're going to start seeing a lot more USDV adoption in the entire ecosystem. That's something that we're working actively through the next few weeks, is to start conversations with a lot of these partners. And we're seeing quite good traction there. There's quite a lot of interest. So I think we're excited to bring up more announcements on that front. It
all sounds incredibly exciting. And we're very, very happy to support you in that journey, and we're very excited to see what happens into the new year. Before we leave, can you tell the listeners where they might be able to find some more information about Vader Protocol? Any sort of sites or a Discord or something?
Yeah, so our call, I guess the best way to have all the information is on our link tree. But most of the information can be found on vaderprotocol.org. The Vader Protocol Telegram, it's at Vader Protocol. Yeah, I think CoinGecko has the full list of all the links to our socials, whether it's Twitter, Discord, or Telegram.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mervyn, and really appreciate you coming on to take this call with us.
I really enjoy this session. Thank you for having us.